Last month I made a video about Hogwarts Legacy. My video was detailing the conversation that was happening around the game regarding whether or not it was a harm for specific communities, very specifically the trans community. The video will be linked down below, so if you want to go see that. When I made that video, I thought people were gonna call me I was wrong. The most controversial thing that came from all of this was this clip. But the game is anti-Semitic because of the representation of goblins. What are you talking about? When I originally made that comment, it was really just an aside. It wasn't really anything to do with the main video or really the main critique that I had for the video as a whole, but it kind of tied into the theme and what I was talking about. But I never thought that that was gonna be the main focus for a lot of people. I ended up posting the clip to TikTok. It blew up to a certain degree, and a lot of people agreed with what I was saying. But there was a group of people who basically tried to discount what I was saying as me disregarding anti-Semitism as a whole, or disregarding the history of Jewish people, when that wasn't the case. So me being who I am, I love having conversations. That's the whole point of this whole channel. That's been the main goal, is that I think people just need to be able to talk to each other and really understand what everybody's saying. If you have a disagreement with me, then we should talk. If I have a disagreement with you, then I want to talk. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I got into a call with a few of the different people who had things to say about the situation as a whole regarding anti-Semitism in Hogwarts Legacy or Harry Potter or J.K. Rowling. They tried to educate me, I tried to educate them, and we'll just see where it goes, you know? Let's see where this all ends up.
Here's the motherfucking tea.
I guess you had an issue with me saying some of the comments that I had in regards to me making the claim that goblins in Harry Potter don't really seem to show that much evidence for there being like anti-Jewish sentiment in the show or anything like that. I just really want to know what you're talking about when you say that.
We're only talking about the 500 years of anti-Semitic propaganda that includes goblins, which was a French word.
Well, that's interesting because my critique doesn't have anything to do with the history of anti-Semitism. It's saying that this instance represented in the Harry Potter movies or the game doesn't really have compelling evidence that this is this is definitely anti-Semitism, you know? And I'm not really sure what you mean or what the importance of it being a French word has to do with it.
France, which hated Jews.
Oh, interesting categorization. Don't we both believe that Jewish people have a long history of oppression?
500 years of anti-Semitic propaganda.
So wouldn't it make sense that most societies have had instances of anti-Semitism for a plethora of different reasons across different cultures, and that there's an ebb and flow of like different times and periods where anti-Jewish sentiment is exacerbated and sometimes when it like dissipates. You've also commented a few times on your videos that I've seen about the Dreyfus affair or like certain instances of French anti-Semitism. It's funny how you left out that during the French Revolution, France was the first country in Europe to emancipate its Jewish population, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're like so pro-Jewish people now, but it's kind of the same logic. Like if I could pull that instance out, then I could say the same claim as you, but in the opposite. You just point out French people or France because it aids your narrative in categorizing goblins as inherently anti-Semitic.
Those look a lot like Harry Potter goblins, don't they?
No, not really. Those look like anti-Semitic caricatures that were specifically made with the intent of being anti-Semitic caricatures. I guess if you want to make the correlation that they both have long noses, then sure, they look similar, but those don't look the same. And yes, it is true that anti-Jewish hatred and it has pervaded Western art, politics, and popular culture for centuries, but that's why the Committee Against Anti-Semitism actually came out in defense of the Harry Potter goblins that J.K. Rowling used, and they said, the portrayal of the goblins in the Harry Potter series is of a piece with their portrayal in Western literature as a whole. It is the product of centuries of association of Jews with grotesque and malevolent creatures in folklore, as well as money and finance. The mythological associations have become so ingrained in the Western mind that their provenance no longer registers with creators or consumers. Those who continue to use such representations are often not thinking of Jews at all, but simply of how readers or viewers will imagine goblins to look, which is a testament more to centuries of Christendom's anti-Semitism than it is to malice by contemporary artists. So it is with J.K. Rowling, who has proven herself over recent years to be a tireless defender of the Jewish community and its fight against anti-Semitism, for which we are immensely grateful. It's hard for me to believe that J.K. Rowling has implemented dog whistles of anti-Semitism into her movies or books or anything like that, when the main theme of the story is against fascism. Voldemort holds the view that he's superior to everybody around, or like the superior wizard. And that's a theme throughout the entire story that Harry Potter and the other protagonists go against. So it's very hard for me to believe that she's implementing anti-Semitic dog whistles. Not only that, but she's very explicitly vocal on Twitter in defense of Jewish people. One of the claims that goes against Jewish people a lot of times is that Jewish people as an ethnicity doesn't exist. Judaism is just a religion. And that's something that is used to attack Jewish people and to attack their identity and their existence as a whole. The redacted name says probably because Judaism is a religion and not a race, which J.K. Rowling comes against, saying most UK Jews in my timeline are currently having to field this kind of crap, so perhaps some of us non-Jews should start shouldering the burden. Anti-Semites think this is a clever argument, so tell us, were atheist Jews exempted from wearing the yellow star? Basically detailing her comprehension of the identity of Jewish people being an ethnicity and not just a religion, because that's something that is used to attack Jewish people. So it's very, that one tweet alone just makes it so hard for your claims against J.K. Rowling to really hold any credence. How can she, in one hand, defend the identity of Jewish ethnicity? Not every Jewish person has to practice Judaism in order to be Jewish, and you don't just get to be Jewish because you are practicing Judaism. But then in the other hand, she's implementing anti-Semitic caricatures into her movies and into her story, where the story is inherently anti-fascist.
Wait, what's that?
That right there is actually the Commonwealth Star, also known as the Federation Star, the 7-point star, or the Star of Federation, symbolizing the Federation of Australia, which came into force on January 1st, 1901. 6 points of the star represent...
Right on the floor. Right there.
If you would just let me finish real quick, I'm explaining to you what it is. 6 points of the star represent the...
6 points.
Yeah, 6 points. 6 points of the star represent the 6 original states of the Commonwealth of Australia, while the 7th point represents the territories and any other future states of Australia. Now I know that star in the center does have 6 stars, but that's because the original star had only 6 points. However, the proclamation in 1905 of the territory of Papua led to the addition of the 7th point in 1909 to represent it and future territories. I know that you want to make the claim that this is the Star of David and that's why it's inherently bad because they used this building and they could have covered it up in post-production, but the only problem with that is nobody was looking at that star and thinking, that's the Star of David. These are a bunch of goblins running a bank. That's anti-Semitic. No, they were thinking, this is the Common House of Australia in London. It's a dope-ass building. We're gonna use this as the bank for Hogwarts, and this is where the bankers are going to work. That star on the ground has nothing to do with Judaism or Jewish people. So if you're making those connections, it's because you're looking at the world and looking at everything through these lenses of anti-Semitism.
Caricatures like this of the goblin, they were created to be anti-Semitic.
Were they? Do you have an example of what part of their creation deemed them specifically inherently anti-Semitic?
A Harry Potter goblin looks like propaganda from Germany in the 1930s and 40s.
That's not what I asked. I know that there's been uses of goblins. I know that goblins have been used to characterize Jewish people and have been used in certain stories and like that, or like in propaganda pieces. What I'm asking you is, are goblins inherently anti-Semitic? Was their creation based off of Jewish people? Because from what I found from my research, goblins appear in various mythologies from around the world, but are primarily centered in European folklore. The first mention of goblins takes place in Western France in the 1100s as Gobelin, and later as the Latin Gobelinus. They existed all around the world, with the general similarity being a small, grotesque little creature that had an affinity for shiny things. Other than that, the history of goblins has a broad range of history, spanning not only across Europe, but across the entire world, with their different iterations of goblin-like creatures. From the hobgoblin that inspired Dobby to the red-cap goblin that would dip his red cap in the blood of his victims. Today, the definition of a goblin is pretty well defined in our minds and in the media they present in, but historically they were pretty broad in range, from sometimes being more fairy-like to even being violent or devilish creatures. Goblins were definitely used to represent Jewish people in some pieces of literature, something things like the Cornish knocker or the goblin market, but that is a far cry from goblins being made specifically to characterize Jewish people. What I did find more prominently is that Jewish people were more associated with devils or imps. I guess we could stretch the definition of what a goblin is to include devils and imps, but at that point, you're just kind of like coping and grasping at straws to make sure that your argument still fits your narrative. Jewish people were also explicitly associated with pigs or livestock during the World War II era, more so than goblins specifically. I understand that people have referred to Jewish people as goblin-esque, but that is very different from the claim that goblins are an anti-Semitic stereotype. There's a difference between something being a stereotype and something being used as a stereotype. For example, rats were also used as an anti-Semitic stereotype in Nazi Germany, but rats aren't intrinsically anti-Semitic. They are just rats. And similarly, most of the time, goblins are just goblins.
So, are you telling me that Jewish people dying is not a real world problem?
I definitely think that's a real world problem, but I think that you're not focused on the real world issues. I think that you're focused on the things that are easy for you to focus on and for you to be able to put out onto social media without really knowing much, because you didn't actually do any of the research, because if you did, you would have found out pretty quickly that none of what you said has been substantiated in any sense. One of the pieces of evidence that you use to bolster your claims is the use of the goblin artifact. Horns like this were used by goblins during the 1612 Goblin Rebellion to rally troops and generally annoy witches and wizards. This horn was discovered in the aftermath of the rebellion behind the Hog's Head Inn, with a wedge of gorgonzola stuffed inside, presumably to mute it. There's 3 claims in this description that you use to bolster your claims of anti-Semitism. First off, the horn. Now, I'm not claiming to know all the ins and outs of Jewish culture, but I did a little bit of research to get some sort of understanding. There are very specific classifications or standards that a shofar needs to meet. So calling any random fucking horn in a video game a shofar is ignorant to the relevance of that instrument. First off, the silver would already deem it not usable in religious ceremonies. It could be displayed but not used. The shofar is made from any animal of the bovine family except that of a cow. The shofar can have carvings, but typically they don't have any markings or adornments. If you just look at the goblin artifact, does that look like a shofar to you? Not only that, but many cultures have used horns as instruments. Vikings, African tribes, that one motherfucker from Narnia. Second thing that we have to point out is that in the description of the goblin artifact, there's a point where it says, the horn was discovered in the aftermath of the rebellion behind the Hog's Head Inn, with a wedge of gorgonzola stuffed inside, presumably to mute it. People are claiming that gorgonzola was specifically not kosher, so it was a very direct jab at Jewish culture because it's not kosher cheese. It is true that gorgonzola was not kosher, but that is true of most artisanal cheeses, not just specifically gorgonzola. Before the 1900s, there was no animal-free rennet. And if you don't know what rennet is the general name for enzymes that act on proteins in milk. Its purpose is to curdle milk for easier digestion. It triggers coagulation. It's a substance that they put into the milk to coagulate it and help curdle it. So Jewish people had to eat cheeses that naturally curdled without being processed or aged. Why did Jewish people have to do that? Because it was not kosher to mix milk with meat. In Judaism, or at least some of the readings, milk and meat could not be consumed together due to this rule coming from Exodus 23:19, which states, "Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk," seeming to be symbolic of not mixing things of nature that should not be combined, symbolic of milk being of the mother or life, and meat being of the son or death. So Jewish people would use things that would naturally coagulate and curdle. Cottage cheese, cream cheese, feta. So any cheese that didn't fit that ruling were non-kosher. Basically any cheese that needed rennet to coagulate or curdle was not kosher until microbial rennets were invented, which did not use animal fats or stomach lining. So I guess you can say that gorgonzola is some mic drop moment for your argument if you didn't know anything about how cheese is made or the reasons why it wasn't kosher for some time before the 1900s. This might have had a little bit more strength if the horn was stuffed full of cottage cheese or something that they actually used, but the last piece of evidence that is used, horns like this were used by goblins during the 1612 Goblin Rebellion. That year is important to this evidence because they mapped the year 1612 onto an actual historical event that happened, the Fetmilch Uprising of 1612, or they say 1612. The actual uprising happened in 1614, but that's just nitpicking at that point. The Fetmilch uprising took place from 1612 to 1616. Tensions began building between the guilds and the merchants towards Jewish people. The tensions were caused by the guilds' demand for greater participation in urban and fiscal policies. The guilds wanted a reduction in grain prices, as well as some anti-Jewish regulations, such as limitation in the number of Jews and a 50% reduction in the interest rate that Jewish moneylenders could charge. After 2 years, the tensions peaked when Fetmilch led a mob and they ran the Jewish people out of the city, killing 3 Jewish people. The only way you can tie this historical event to the game is if you're engaging through that lens that the game, J.K. Rowling, and writers and the developers are all inherently anti-Semitic. Based on your presuppositions, you can easily confirm pretty much anything that remotely associates to your conclusions. Jewish people have one of the most extensive histories of oppression.
500 years.
You could probably throw a dart at a calendar and find some sort of atrocity that has happened or has been done to them during any time period. You could point to that being a dog whistle, but I need like definitive evidence. I need to see that J.K. Rowling represents anti-Semitic views. I need to see that the developers represent anti-Semitic views. Equating in-game history to real-world history off the basis that you already believe that goblins in the game represent Jewish people. I think that you're just using this to make yourself look good and feel good. And I mean, that's cool, but what I take issue with is that you perceive yourself as a good person without actually doing anything good. And then you attack people that you perceive as bad, but you don't even know what good is.
I didn't know it was that hard to just shut the fuck up and listen to Jewish people when they tell you that something's hurting them.
Okay, so which ones should we be listening to? Which Jewish people should we be listening to?
My Jewish friends are telling me this is hurting them.
So you're just cherry picking the Jewish people that you're listening to? Because there's a lot of other Jewish people who are going against what you're saying, who are going against this narrative that Harry Potter goblins are anti-Semitic. So I could just pick the Jewish people that I agree with, and you are just gonna pick the Jewish people that you agree with. And apparently that's the way we're supposed to define our thoughts process and how we come to our conclusions on things. That just doesn't make sense. You really don't have to do that much work. If you're just going to like Jewish people and like, hey, what do you think about this? Oh, that's right. All right, I'm gonna say that shit then. You're using people, minority groups, as a shield to protect yourself from criticism, because all you have to say is listen to Jewish people. Who? Which ones? The ones you agree with? The ones that support your narrative? I don't give a fuck what an individual person says. I'm not gonna let other people decide what's good and what's bad for me. I'll take that into account. I'll take their experience into account. But it seems like you're not even going to that level. You don't even know. Someone made a comment under one of your videos. They said, honestly, I'm guilty of not knowing this at all. Goblins are in so many fantasy games that it never crossed my mind that they even had history. And then they go on to ask that these other games in media that depict goblins, are they also bad? And your response was to just say, let me tag in actual Jewish creators and see if they can help with answering that. I don't want to give wrong information. And the one person that did come to respond to you said, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with those games, how goblins are represented in them, but I bet there's some dog whistles in them. I just don't understand this. Why is everything dog whistles? How is everything dog whistles? It's like, how come all of the evidence you guys bring up are dog whistles? You don't have any strong evidence? You don't have anything that J.K. Rowling has said or that the game developers have said, patterns of anti-Semitism? You guys are just going off of dog whistles?
I would be embarrassed if I were you.
No, I would be more embarrassed if I were you. You guys sound more like these like conspiracy theorists who go off of claims that are built off of nothing. You guys have dog whistles that connects everything, that connects all the dots, and it's like, oh my god, you guys see this? Everything's connected. This means this, and then this means this, and that like also leads us to believe that J.K. Rowling is anti-Semitic, even though we're not gonna look at the whole fucking history of like her defending anti-Semitism, and it all makes sense. We're not in the Matrix like you guys. It's similar to people who make conspiracy theories about fucking like 9/11 and shit like that, or conspiracy theories about the elections. So many things have to line up in order for your narrative to work. You guys don't have any strong evidence, just like conspiracy theorists don't have strong evidence for their claims. It's easy to be a conspiracy theorist or base everything off of dog whistles when you don't know anything.
Shut the fuck up.
I'm on Goblin time. I'm on Goblin time. I'm on Goblin time, brother. I'm on Goblin time. I guess I just want to know like what you think that I was saying. in that clip.
Saying that basically people are reading too much into this and that it's their fault if they see similarities between the Goblins in Hogwarts Legacy and the real-life portrayal of Jewish people.
No. What I was saying was that your evidence can't only be that there are goblins. Like it can't just be the goblins. It has to be like some other thing to support that. Because it could be the case that the goblins are representative of some anti-Semitic caricatures or based off of like old anti-Semitic folklore, but we need more than just them being there to represent that. So was there anything like maybe the developers have some kind of sentiment, or
I hate to be that guy, but are you stupid, or did you intentionally miss the point so that way you could trick other people into believing the same dumb shit you believe?
No, it's not about tricking anybody. I didn't really have any opinion about this beforehand. I just feel like if I ask for a little bit more evidence, I need more than dog whistles. I need more than you guys pointing to like something in the game that doesn't really hold up. But all you guys are saying is that goblins have been inherently anti-Semitic, and I just don't think that's true. And it's not even about thinking anymore. I know that's not true. Goblins have not been inherently anti-Semitic. They have been used by anti-Semitic people for anti-Semitic caricatures, but they are not inherently anti-Semitic. So now I just need a little bit of proof of whether or not these Harry Potter goblins are being used as anti-Semitic caricatures now.
What people are saying is that this depiction of goblins in Harry Potter is very, very similar to the depiction of Jewish people in anti-Semitic media.
It could be seen as similar, but that's very different than being anti-Semitic caricatures. The Penguin from Batman is similar, but are we saying that the Penguin from Batman is anti-Semitic? We need more than similar or looks like. We need definitively. We need to see that J.K. Rowling represents anti-Semitic views. We need to see that these developers represent anti-Semitic views.
This game was originally created and, the head developer was originally a far-right neo-Nazi who has since been let go from the team.
You mean Troy Leavitt? A senior developer, not head director, but he was in charge of castle design and NPC behavior. Didn't have anything to do with writing the story. That's the neo-Nazi? Oh, I wonder where you heard that from.
Harry Potter game designer used to run anti-social justice YouTube channel. That's not a joke. A gamergator is designing this game. Here are the videos of the lead designer? No way. Oh, man. Ah, yes! In defense of John Lasseter, why I'm opposed to net neutrality, it's okay to be a gamer? This is what skeptic channels were like. They were all too on the nose. These are the only people who lack self-awareness more than Rowling herself. This is just what it was like for years in YouTube, until I showed up and single-handedly disbanded this.
Yeah, those thumbnails do look pretty wild. I wonder what the white supremacist neo-Nazi has to say about trans identities.
Shapiro claims his position is rooted in biology, and so he denies that there's anything genuine about people who claim to be transgendered. For him, it's a super simple equation. If you're born with a penis, you're a man, and if you're born with a vagina, you're a woman. He even goes so far as to refuse, rather smugly I might add, to call a transgendered woman like Blair White by her feminine pronouns. But again, biology isn't constrained by your ability to understand it, Mr. Shapiro. There are some genuine science-based reasons to acknowledge that being transgender is rooted in developmental biology. Now, I should be clear that I agree with Ben in that the social constructionist theory of gender is largely garbage, and it is not backed up by evidence. While there is some latitude in societal expectations of gender performance that are worthwhile to consider, the overwhelming preponderance of the evidence indicates that one's gender identity does not vary independently from one's biological sex. Upwards of 99% of the time, your sex at birth does indeed determine your gender identity. But again, you can't exclude the observations of science regarding those rare developmental exceptions in the interest of serving a political agenda. The more that scientists and doctors investigate transgenderism, the more it is beginning to look like there are actual biological roots for the condition called gender dysphoria.
You guys made the claim that this game developer was a neo-Nazi, white supremacist, alt-right YouTuber based off of the thumbnails, and you didn't watch the videos? You're telling me that my media literacy is bad, that I don't have good media analysis, and this is shit you should have this is shit you should have learned in high school. But you got all your information about Troy Leavitt off of Kotaku, off of these opinion piece websites, and they all got their information off of Twitter. The same thing that Vosh got his information off of. Opinion piece articles and Twitter of a screenshot of just the thumbnails and titles on Troy Leavitt's YouTube account. You didn't watch the videos? No way. You fucked yourself. This guy's a neo-Nazi? When he just detailed the trans experience and how it maps onto biology, in response to Ben Shapiro being like, this is not biologically true, he's like, well, actually, it is biological. It's just rare.
I didn't see that as an accomplishment of any one group or demographic. You know, it's not white men who are doing this. No. I saw it as something that the entire species took part in. And that's very much how I view the world. I think that it's time for us to grow up and get past being so tribal over such petty things as our demographics. Whether we're, white or black, male or female, gay, straight, trans, it doesn't matter.
Oh my God, man. Oh my fucking God. I don't know, man. It's so fucking like frustrating sometimes. Cause it's like people try so hard to just make sure that they're right about everything, that they'll just say shit and they'll just say things and put it out there. And it creates this fucking like problem where the people who are going to go and actually look into these things will find out that everything that these people are pushing is lying or uninformed about what they're fucking pushing. And they have so much conviction that it just puts their entire purpose on the back burner. Oh, it's so fucking stupid, man. Why? Like, why lie? This is the type of shit that, like, this is why I'm watching the videos, and this is why I'm doing these streams, and this is why I'm, like, doing all this work, because I want to make sure that I'm not just pushing other people's shit.
And then I recognize, in my view, that the smallest minority, the minority most worthy of protection, is the individual. And that's how I tend to see the world altogether. I see it like we're all notes in the grand symphony of humanity. Everybody has a part to play. It doesn't matter what your background is. You add to the richness of that symphony. And I think we can...
I can't, man. The whole fucking shit where people were calling this dude a white supremacist, unhinged. Unfucking hinged. You don't have a worldview like this, and you're racist. Like, what the fuck? Oh, they're using that word with no meaning. It's funny because, like, you could do the same thing to me where, like, if you just looked at the thumbnails and the titles and didn't watch the videos, you could label me in any kind of way you really want to. But when you actually watch the videos, you can see the nuance that I put into these videos. I don't understand how we've come up in this YouTube culture, this culture of like content creation and like clickbait and all this shit to get you to click so that you do watch and then you listen. But nobody's listening. Everybody's just trying to fit everything into their narrative, fit it to work out this way. The idea that anybody was using this game developer as like a strong point in their argument to prove that this game has harmful stereotypes in it. I don't know. I could go on and on and on about all these different claims that are being made, that were made in support of this narrative that the game is anti-Semitic and that J.K. Rowling and the developers were all anti-Semitic and shit like that. Or that I'm anti-Semitic for what I was saying. But I know that these people that made these claims and are pushing that narrative aren't going to change their minds. So why even do this? A month after this whole conversation even happened, why give a fuck? Who gives a shit? I felt like there was probably people who didn't know. Like, I didn't know. I made that comment in the original video, not thinking really that there was going to be any issue with what I said. But after, they started bringing up these claims, I looked into them expecting for some of them to be right and for them to sway me in a certain direction or like help me understand more. But all it made me understand was that people don't give a fuck about what they say as long as they feel like they are doing something good. Because as long as they feel good, they don't give a fuck about who they harm. They don't give a fuck about what they say. It doesn't matter. And that's really what it comes down to. Really what this video is about what it means to be a good person. I did not expect for every step of the way of my research to find that everything that they were saying or everything that they were claiming to be half-truths or straight-up lies. I really did expect that I was going to find something, some evidence, some deeper evidence than just the dog whistles that they had presented. I thought there was going to be more. The only way that any of their narrative works is if you believe it is true. There's no backing evidence to these dog whistles. There's nothing. There's nothing there. I would have changed my entire tune if J.K. Rowling had a plethora of anti-Semitic messages, or maybe if the developers did have some sort of like anti-Semitic leaning. Just taking your interpretation of what the Goblins represent or what the Goblins storyline represents or any of this shit and associate that with the whole conversation surrounding like the trans community or its association with J.K. Rowling really just showed me and proved to me that none of this was about the merits of the game or the merits of the story or any of this. None of it mattered. It was all about making yourself feel good. The real message I want people to take away from this is that people just want to be good. They just want to be good. At the beginning of all this research, it definitely was to get back at these fucking assholes who eventually got me banned off of TikTok. To prove that they were holding the high moral ground without really any foundation. To prove that I was right and laugh in their face of how stupid they were to believe any of this shit. But as I did my research and I mulled over what I was doing, I realized that I had the opportunity to do something better. I know those people who made those baseless claims about me and who shit on me with their responses and called me stupid and like dumb and shit like that are never going to change their mind. But if they did, I want to allow them that room to be able to change and to be able to grow. Not like they would allow me that same room for growth, but I personally think that they're stuck in their ideology because of fear. Fear of being wrong, because being wrong in their worldview is synonymous with being bad. That's why it's easy to let other people to tell you what is good and what is bad. It alleviates that fear of being wrong because you could just point to, oh, well, I listen to Jewish people. I listen to black people. I listen to all these other minority groups. They told me what was good. So if you're going to get mad at anybody, get mad at them. It's much harder to find out for yourself. I think the reason I am so okay with being wrong is because I don't view people as being inherently good or being inherently bad. I just view people as being, and that most people are pursuing goodness. Some people pursue badness, but for the most part, I think people are pursuing something that is good. But just pursuing goodness doesn't make you good because it could be done in a bad way. Really, all this comes down to is a crucial conversational tool that I think a lot of people are lacking. Understanding.
I would be embarrassed if I were you.